to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. I am honored to have my friend and previous guest, Cheryl Luckett, with me today. This is another episode in our Black Lives Matter series. Cheryl today shares her experience in growing up in the Deep South, and she shares her first recollection of racism and the thoughts that went through her mind in that horrifying moment. Also during our conversation, Cheryl also explains how the lack of inclusion in our own design industry is not the only hurdle that we face. The lack of resources is another example of how racism shows up in our industry. So pay particular attention when she explains that. I also encourage you to take the time to listen to Cheryl's first two appearances on the show, episodes 291 and 397. She is a rock star businesswoman. She shared with us how she entered the interior design world by blogging and chronicling her own home improvement projects and how this quickly morphed into a side hustle decorating other people's homes. We discussed how she planned for 5 years how to leave corporate life behind and open her own firm. It's an awesome story, particularly inspiring if you too are currently doing design as your side hustle and have dreams of being a full-time designer. Cheryl is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and her work has been published both locally and nationally in traditional home, country living, and southern home. In the second appearance on the show, she updated us with her firm's successes and shared the news of her first licensed collection of upholstered furniture with North Carolina-based company, Sylvester Alexander. The collection is called Belle by Cheryl Luckett. Please go to sylvesteralexander.com to see it and to see if maybe you can specify something for your next project. And if your taste is more mid-century modern, please open your trade account at Article by going to welldesign.article.com. This is your stop for Scandinavian-inspired furniture for living rooms, dining rooms, office, and outdoor spaces. Often, Article can be delivered within days. So if you have a client who is fed up with working from home at their kitchen table, be the hero and get them outfitted with proper office furniture within the week. Get started today at welldesigned.article.com. Okay, let me reintroduce you to Cheryl Luckett. Hi, Cheryl. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Thank you for having me, LuAnn. How are you?
I'm good. So, Cheryl, the first two times that you've been on the show, they were, I will just remind everybody, episode 291 and 397. You rocked our world on those two episodes. You really did. I mean, you have had such an outstanding business career, both before becoming an interior designer and your transition into becoming an interior designer. And what I have really seen is how many people have called you brilliant? Because a lot of people should call you brilliant.
Well,
I'm just saying. No, when I think about it, like that's a good word for you, because you make a plan, you attach accountability to the plan, you put markers on when certain things are going to happen, and then you go about and you make them happen. And then you not only do that, but then you turn around and you help other people do the same thing. And that's really to be well admired.
Well,
Cheryl.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like the same has been done for me. So I feel a responsibility to pay it forward.
Well, you know what? A lot of people have had it done for them and they don't do it. So I'm acknowledging you and what you've done. And the thing is, if you don't know Cheryl Luckett, you need to go back and listen to these other two episodes and you need a pen and paper for them. I'm just going to tell you, because there's a lot to learn about getting your interior design business off the ground. And now today, Cheryl has joined me to talk about Black Lives Matter and her experience in being a Black woman, a Black interior designer, Black entrepreneur. And what I've come to learn, and I've said it on the various shows, is that this is a big ask, that this is for me and for you as the extended audience to have our friends like Cheryl and Kay has shown up, and Rashida and Corey Damon, for them to show up and share this time with us is not to be underestimated. And now I'm thanking and telling you, Cheryl, I appreciate your showing up for this today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for continuing this conversation, because I feel like not only do they need to happen, but they need to be sustained. It's the understanding of our experiences that brings compassion, and that is ultimately what's going to be the impetus for the change that we want to see happen. So thank you for continuing the conversation.
Thank you. Well, that is my goal. My goal is to be a part of a mechanism that does continue the conversation. My goal is to do it and not sound like a dummy. I'm just going to tell you. However, I am willing to try it and go through it despite that risk, because I believe it is necessary. And I make a joke, but there's nothing funny about it. There's nothing funny about not really understanding the depth of what you and our other friends have gone through for their whole lives. And so here we are, Cheryl. And, you and I talked a little bit off air about how we would frame this conversation. And one of the things that you said was important to you was to explain to us and really inform us on your upbringing and your family and what informed you and made the experiences of who you are today. So why don't you start us off and give us that background?
Yeah. So, racism is such a collective societal issue, but it really manifests itself in a million different ways. Depends on, where you're from, what kind of environment you were brought up in. Your experience the collective experience might be racism, but it might look very different. So I grew up in the Deep South. Like literally there is no further southern point than South Mississippi, without being in the water. I'm from Gulfport, coastal town in Mississippi. It's a more progressive area of the state, but it's Mississippi nonetheless.
Right, it's still Mississippi.
Absolutely. So, and all that goes with that. In fact, as we speak this week, the vote was passed to take down the state flag, which includes the Confederate flag embedded within it. So that's where we are today, 2020. Wow. So I grew up in that environment, but I grew up to parents who also were from Mississippi, who grew up during the civil rights movement. They were educators, and they were very strategic about providing opportunities for us, but also helping us to understand that we would need to navigate in a world that wasn't going to be for us. And so we became innately aware that we would have to work twice as hard to get half as far. That was just the way it was. We knew it from day one, and we had to swim upstream, so to speak. But they told us that it would be worth it. And so to do the hard work, to get the education, to act like you had some sense, to show up. And in spite of all of the doing of that, we still, of course, experience the racism that everybody else does, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You're still Black. I can think back in listening to your previous episodes with Corey and Kay. I started to think about what's my first recollection of racism. when did I what is kind of etched in my brain as it relates to being discriminated against? And a couple of things came to mind. My dad was he actually was my principal in middle school, but prior to that, when I was a little younger, he was an assistant principal at a school, which basically meant he handled all the disciplinary issues. So if you were getting suspended, he was probably doing that. Well, one day we were coming home. I probably was in lower elementary school. We were coming home. We drove up to our little yellow house with the brick and the shutters, our privacy fence, and the N word was spray painted on the side of our fence. Wow. And I remember, gosh, I probably was maybe second grade. I don't remember my parents making like a big thing about it. They sheltered us a lot, but I remember thinking for the first time, they don't want us here. Like, we're not supposed to be here. We don't belong. And so it's funny because I had to remind my mom of that incident. She was like, "Oh, of course, yeah, I remember it." It was likely someone that my dad had disciplined at school, but it was the N word nonetheless, spray painted on our privacy fence. And so that I think is etched in the back of my mind. Another incident was when the school was going on a field trip. About this time, I was probably 4th or 5th grade, and the field trip was to Beauvoir. Beauvoir is the post-war home of Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. And this was the school field trip in 4th or 5th grade. And I remember my mom saying, "You are not going on the field trip to Beauvoir."
Right.
You're not. You're going to go and
I draw the line somewhere
with your grandparents.
There's just certain things we're not going to do.
We're not supporting. I'm not paying a fee. You're not going to tour the president of the Confederacy's house. So sorry. And so again, realizing that experience was not crafted for me. So again, early on, a million little things that remind you that yes, you are in is not your own. It's also an incidence of we had a shoplifting incident where we were accused. My sister and I were accused of shoplifting. We were at this discount store, and they had gotten inventory of discount designer handbags, and we were all excited. I was probably maybe 6th grade. My sister had a job, her first job, and so we thought, oh, we were going to go get us a designer handbag on the cheap. And so me and my cousin and a couple other friends, we all met up, like, let's go see what they've got. And we were there, and as we were leaving, the security guard stops us and wants to search our bags. And we are, of course, like, what are you talking about? And so the people come out of the back, and they are like, we think you've got something in your bag. We need to search it. So my older cousin was like, "You're not searching my bag." And they're like, "Well, we're going to have to call your parents." Our parents show up. Again, we hadn't done anything, but we looked like we might have been stealing something. So it's those kinds of experiences that really shape who you become. Being in that environment in Mississippi with its history, to parents who experienced all kinds of things. Even in that, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. I went to a predominantly white school in elementary, middle, and high school. And so I was used to being one of few. And so because of that, you learn how to become really adept at navigating in a world that's not your own. You have to, there's this notion, I don't know if you're familiar with the term shifting. It's something that Black women have to do a lot of to meet with the cultural norms. Sometimes we have to deny our true selves to be able to fit into whatever environment we're in. And so you get really good at fitting in to the majority culture, especially when you're immersed in it almost all the time. So outside of Sunday morning, that was my life. You're in high school, you're in an AP class, well, you're one of two people. So my decision to go to a historically Black college was very intentional, because not only did I grow up with parents who exposed us to that, and kind of directed us in that path, I realized that that's going to be my opportunity. For 4 years, I get to be fully me, surrounded by people who are like me. I don't have to wear a mask. I can fully express who Cheryl is. And I'm no longer one of few. So that for me was intentional.
And was it that way? Did it feel like what you expected it to feel like, or was there still remnants of it in your, well, there would have been when you went out of the college environment, but at least in the classroom and your interactions with teachers, you felt like you could really be you.
You felt safe. Right? I remember crying at freshman convocation because I looked around the room, and I went to Tennessee State, which is fairly large. I looked around at all the freshmen in white that looked just like me. I couldn't imagine, having come from, predominantly white school in South Mississippi, where there were, 3 people in the AP classes with me that looked like me, to be in a gymnasium full of people just like me, who were striving to get a good education and doing great. It was like euphoria.
Wow.
Like, I cannot believe I'm with people where I don't have to pretend to be something else. And to your point, of course, that was 4 years, and then you graduate. Now you're in the work world.
Into the world.
I'm a dietitian by trade, which is a profession that at that time was more than 90% white females. Mm-hmm. So here we are, back to, all right, put your mask back on, because you got to navigate with the majority culture. So now I'm back to being one of few. So it's just it shapes who you are, how you show up. And I'll tell you, LuAnn, because of my experience and my ability to quote unquote fit in to the norm, I became the comfortable option for diversity. So do you follow what I'm saying?
Yes. In other words, like, fragile white people weren't threatened to be around you. So we'll pick you because you don't make, us feel as uncomfortable as someone who hasn't learned how to put a mask on 90% of their day. I'm getting it now. Oh, I'm getting it.
So I often, the more adept I became at fitting in to the world, the more opportunities I got to be in that world. And so now there comes the responsibility to represent, because now I'm the only one that's in. The weight, the responsibility to be included, so that we can continue to be included and at the table, is now on me.
Wow. It's I've learned from each interview where and how the sentence is so right on. I'm exhausted. Mm-hmm. And for each of you, you've shared a different part and a different way that has, why that has meaning for you. And I'm sure there's 10 other ways where you share the exact same experiences, but I'm hearing all of that. And so the question is, it sounds like to me that, Kay just recently shared that she chooses to raise her children, her and her husband, Tim, in a predominantly white neighborhood and everything, because that's where the opportunities for the good schools are. And that's the same that your parents did for you. That was why they did the same thing, because they were educators, and they knew if they lived in a place where you weren't having to have a mask on all day, you would not have been educated at the level that you were. That's crazy. I mean, it's not, when I say that's crazy, I don't mean that I don't get it. I don't mean that I don't know it's true. It's just thinking about the gravity of that situation every day, that, your secular family, your nuclear family is feeling, like you said, it was the first time you were like, they don't want us here.
And they grew up, of course, in a time where there wasn't the option.
Right.
Right. There is no
Right.
option.
Right.
This is for
Right.
you,
You're
and
going to get the
that's for
crappy
us.
schools, and that's
Yes.
that.
Right.
Right. And so they were able to overcome and still get educated and become professionals. But they said, like you said, we want to give you some actual strategic opportunity to overcome this, but get ready. You're going to work twice as hard for half as much. Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. I can hear and see how that was not just dramatizing things, but how, Cheryl, like you know, you're a grown woman now, and you look back and you process it, and you understand that your parents did. They made a decision. Whether you might have grown up and said, you know what, I don't like a decision you made. I would have rather lived with my own people and not felt like I was constantly the one of two, right? But I hear that you have appreciation and value for what their decisions, and that it played out well for you, right? But how, when you think back to when you were a child, like the illogicalness of it. I've said, you've heard me on the show, I've said 1,000 times, I was raised, if not you, Hulu, right? Like I was raised like you put your mind to it, go do it.
Right.
And so I can't imagine, what is that like to someone like yourself, Cheryl? You're smart, you're driven, you have the ability innate. Forget what any teacher or school was going to teach you to expand your knowledge. You're that same little girl like I was, that's like, wait, if I just work hard, I can do this. Oh no, wait, if I just work hard, I get half as much. How do you process that as a child? And when I say it as a child, I mean the coming of age child, when you get to be that 15, 16, 18, 20, and it's like, oh, this really isn't going to be easy, no matter how qualified I am to do it. Like, how does your parents inspire you without deflating you at the same time, I guess is the question. They need to prepare you logically, but their job and what they saw in you, I'm sure, was nothing but potential.
Yeah. I think you don't know it's so pervasive that you don't know any different.
Makes sense.
You don't know any different, right? Here's an example.
It's what you're raised with.
Yeah, it's what you're raised with. I remember in high school, this was the early 90s, when we ran for homecoming court. There was a quota for how many black homecoming maids versus how many white homecoming maids. And so if two black girls in the high school class, let's say they got the highest number of votes, they wouldn't be selected because there was only one slot for a black one.
In the 90s? Yeah,
I graduated in 94.
Oh,
this was in the 90s.
My goodness. That's like a story from the 60s or the 70s to me.
So when you talk about working just as hard or twice as hard to get half as far, that's a really good example.
That's right.
The deck is stacked against me. There are only 2 slots. So if it's 3 popular black girls, oh well.
Whoa. And see, that's where that's where I think, I guess, my ignorance really shows, because I don't understand that from an institutional standpoint. And I guess that is the point. It is simply just racism. It's just, we're going to not allow these women here, because they're black, to enjoy the success that the rest of you white girls have.
Yeah,
it's as simple, because there's no other logical reason. Right. If you're the 3 most popular voted ones, who gives a rip?
Yeah.
But see, my question is who, like, this might be really naive of me, but if we were to have that, school board on the call right now, are they going to actually have some logical reason for that other than racism? Like, are they going to be able, would they say, like, that's how my brain goes, really? Are they just saying, no, room for 2, the rest are this way?
I think it was probably put in place to, quote unquote, diversify, because the school was predominantly white. So that was throwing the minority race a bone by saying, well, you probably won't get the majority of the votes, so if we segment it, we can at least get some representation.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And the thing is too, the other part about when you came home with your dad in the car that day, and you said that it was probably somebody that was disciplined. And the thing that I heard in there was it probably was some dumb. I want to curse. To see now, every time I do these shows, I want to curse. I'm like, "Lynn, you can't curse." It probably was some stupid, dumb young kid that was just acting out. But here's the difference. What I know is that because your family was black, he felt like he could cross a line that if the vice principal wasn't black, he would have thrown a tomato at the house or put toilet paper. Right. But he wouldn't have felt like he could do such a blatant, horrible thing and not worry about the repercussions, because it was like, hey, well, they're black and that's what's going to happen. Nobody's going to give me grief over this. Yeah, I can see that being realistic. I can see it being totally realistic.
So much self-policing that you have to do. Then you enter the workforce. I had some conversations with some former coworkers over the past few weeks, and we talked about little unwritten rules that we had. I mean, corporate culture, it's a whole other thing. You talk about play by the rules. There are a lot of rules. And they're even more for people who are black. So we had we would be at let's say a mix or a networking event or a panel discussion, and it's the cocktail hour before the panel discussion. We wouldn't congregate together. If we were together, we'd be like, okay, we need to break up. This was an unwritten rule that we didn't need to spend too much time together congregating because it was going to make people uncomfortable. So we needed to disperse ourselves amongst the other people.
And when you say unwritten rule, you mean you each intuitively knew it and understood it, or you said it out loud to each other, but it wasn't written somewhere that you could. In other words, you know what I'm saying? Did you intuitively just like, look, we don't do this when we're in a group of white people because they're all going to get free.
Yep. So you both. I think we intuitively knew that we knew what to do to make sure that everybody was comfortable so that we could hopefully keep our job or advance or what have you. We intuitively knew that, but we also amongst ourselves, it's just these are the things that you're taught. If you're going to operate in this environment, this is how you need to navigate.
Mm-hmm. And I can relate that to thinking about women's lib, right? Because I almost could picture if you are in, maybe go back into the 70s and you are, like you said, you feel the responsibility, you made it in, you're one woman. So if I just say every white lady listening out there, think about it. Put yourself in a situation where you make it through the glass ceiling and you're invited to the big show and you're part of the executive C-suite team, and maybe there's 4 other women in a group of 50 men. I can see the exact same logic. It's like we can't be seen as the girls over here talking. We have to be standing mixed up in each other, not like when we come in the room, we need the security of each other. Yep. And how about we just really would rather talk to each other, but no one would actually look at it that way, right? But see, that's totally relatable. I can understand that. And it's horrible because it's every single day of your life, no matter what you're doing.
All the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the thing, though, that you do go into this career path into corporate. Mm-hmm. And you were telling me you had an interesting little, you were a dietitian, but you had this moment, Cheryl. Yep. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So, you can always connect the dots looking back, right? I'm in interior design now. I made a career shift. It was really strategic. Talked about it on your show. And when I look back at my career, I became a dietitian. I did that for about a decade. I worked in a Fortune 500 food service company. And I look back and I think, gosh, that was great that I had that opportunity because it gave me insight into how well-run businesses operate, the things that they do, how they segment their business, how they plan for the future, all of those things. I had access to that, how valuable that was. One of the things that was always a question mark is my last position in corporate was I was the director of diversity and inclusion for a large segment of our business. And I always kind of scratched my head like, how in the world, how does that connect to anything? Obviously, as a Black female in the corporate space, I had a vested interest in the subject. So even as a dietitian, I was always on in affinity groups or on leadership councils related to diversity or women in the workplace. So I was involved, but that wasn't my career path. I didn't have a degree in HR or business. So it was kind of weird that I ended up in that position. But I did. And now, only now, can I understand why I needed to spend 5 years in that space as the director of D&I, helping a large company put together a diversity and inclusion strategy, assessing how well we were training, hiring, promoting diverse populations, because now it all has come full circle. And here I am in a whole different career path, which has nothing to do with HR or corporate anything. And here we are having the same conversation over here.
Right. And you know what? We're going to look for your voice in the future as we keep going, right? Because this is what our industry needs.
Yes.
Our industry needs their eyeballs opened up.
Yep, absolutely.
Right?
So I think there are a lot of lessons learned in corporate that can relate to our business and our industry. You can argue the fact that in corporate it's a check the box, because there are literally laws that hold you accountable for some of these things. There's a EEOC where you've got to have some level of equity in the workplace. And there are reports that have to be submitted every year. Within our business, there's not necessarily that accountability. So we have to be really intentional about our efforts because no one's checking. So I think that some of the things that we did really well in corporate, number one, the foundation was training. Training was a requirement. And I think about as an entrepreneur, how when I don't know how to do something, or I feel like I need some training in an area, I go seek it out. Doesn't matter whether it's around business systems, finances, marketing. If I need, help with visibility, I might hire PR agents. I go seek out that help. I get the training that I need to be successful. I feel like this is an area where we have to be intentional about seeking out diversity training, whether it's around unconscious bias or appreciating differences. Those are things. That's going to lay the foundation. And just like we work on our business in other areas, this needs to be a part of it. So whether you're a firm of 1 or 25 or a manufacturer, I feel like diversity training needs to be a part of your business strategy. It's the first step, really.
Right.
Yeah, it just really is. We also were really intentional about inclusion, because diversity is really more about representation, right? You want to make sure that you've got a diverse group at the table. Inclusion is about making sure everybody has an equal voice at the table. It's one thing for me to be invited to the party. It's another thing for me to have a voice at the party, for somebody to listen to what I have to say in the same way that they listen to what others have to say. So we got to get intentional about that inclusion aspect as well. And that might be a little bit more difficult than you would think, especially when you think about the industry that we're in. It's the whole gist of design is exclusivity, luxury for the elite, historically for the elite. So we've got some silos we have to break down just because of the industry that we're in. So really, I feel like this part really is going to require some intentional effort to go outside of our bubble, to seek out different voices. Again, not only to seek them out and include them, but to make sure that they are also included and have a voice.
Right. And when you're talking about this right now, Cheryl, are you thinking more, and of course it applies to both, but I'm imagining while you're talking, are you picturing the inner workings of our industry when you're having conversations? Are you picturing the shelter magazines, the panels that are set up, the schools, and, all of that, or are you mostly picturing, because like I said, don't get me wrong, I know it applies to both, or are you mostly picturing when as interior designers you go out and do your work and the opportunities that you earn on maybe commercial projects or residential projects or things like that? What are you visualizing when you're saying those words?
All of the above.
All of the above.
I think we all have onus in this.
Yeah. Oh, I know that. I mean, because what was going through my mind is the conversation I had with Rashida, your mentee, Rashida Gray. And she was saying how when you were talking about our industry it's going to be a tough hurdle because it's an industry based on exclusivity, on luxury, right? She was explaining how another hurdle is that the very low percentage of Black people that own their own home versus white people, and therefore if you just know, you just take as for granted that people like to work with people who look and feel and look like them, so therefore the opportunities for design are shrunk because economically the Black community is kept down, and therefore there's, you know what I mean? So I was wondering if you were talking about that, or are we talking to the brands and the manufacturers and all of the people in our actual industry to have diversity, to include our Black interior designers and experts and so forth, and then to listen to what they say when we invite them to the table?
Well, I think it can look different. We all need to be addressing these things, but it might look different for the manufacturer or the magazine editor than the small business owner.
Right. Okay.
So I think there are things that we can all do. They may not be, they get at the same issue, but they might not all be the same. Might not all have the same tactics to get there. So
right. It's about everybody paying attention to what they can do.
Yes, and doing it. Absolutely. Yes. So for example, in corporate, we had a supplier diversity initiative. I worked at a food service company, so many of our vendors had to be minority and women owned. So that to me, that's an easy enough thing. If you own, I don't care how many employees you have or how big your firm is, you're purchasing things. Right. Have you thought or looked at, am I purchasing anything from a minority owned business? I mean, that's easy, right? We purchase things day in, day out, all day, sun up to sundown. Am I supporting anybody's business that doesn't look like me?
Right. And when we think about the different brands, it occurs to me, I don't know if this is proper or not, but Sylvester Alexander, where you have your own line, right?
Yes.
Right?
So whether you buy my 5 pieces or not, that's neither here nor there. That is a minority-owned furniture vendor.
And to give it a thought, give them a thought. And when you're going to go out and specify, don't just, if you've never looked at their line before, if you've never thought of them, just don't keep doing business as usual, but to consciously give opportunity. If you go in the furniture line isn't your cup of tea, no big deal, right?
Absolutely.
But to pay attention.
Don't stop there. Somebody has something.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And so on the supplier side, on the manufacturing, furniture company, like I struggle. One of the tenets of my business is I want my clients' homes to reflect who they are. I shared this on social media. LuAnn, one of the things I hear more than anything else from my clients is we want our home to represent who we are. Now, caveat, 2019, 75% of my clientele was Black. 2018, it was 82. So we're talking about people who are hardworking, who have probably been, like me, one of few all of their life. They work in a world that is maybe not the most inclusive of them, or that constantly reminds them that they're different, or maybe that they don't even belong. So it's my job then to create an environment at home where they can be fully them, where they can see themselves reflected. And so I am constantly on the hunt for things that do that.
Right.
Constantly. Right. And because my style is a little bit more traditional, a little bit more maybe understated, I have a hard time. So I go to my vendors. Let's just say I'm doing a bathroom and I want a nude on the wall. Well, guess what? I want the nude to be a reflection of the people who live in the house.
We don't want a white nude in a black family's bathroom. That's just ridiculous.
Right. So I'm now tasked with weeding through all the selections to find a reflection of who I'm serving. So from a supplier standpoint, can you evaluate your inventory and say, well, what's our inventory look like in terms of art, for instance, or whatever? Is there a way for us to make sure that we are representing different cultures in our offerings?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so true. I mean, Rashida even mentioned, I think it was off air, she talked about how when she was a little girl, her mother searching for a little doll for her that was black, right? Yep. It's like no different. You grow up and you're, like you said, you've grown up, you've done all the things, you've worked twice as hard. Yep. You've got the mask on when you're out there. Yep. When you come home, can I just look over at a nude black lady?
Right?
Thanks.
Yes. One that doesn't have a top knot, because my clients don't have a top knot.
See, even that, right? The different, right. It's, yes, I hear that. And so it's a matter of being intentional as an interior designer. And I'm hearing this is a really good thing that you can sink your teeth into as a tactic. It's, as an interior designer, evaluate the brands and the vendors and the manufacturers, push through to say, do you have this product? This is what the kinds of things that my black community, people are looking for, and my clients, I was looking for, are looking for. And to not just say, okay, that was too hard, I guess you don't have it, is to be more vocal about that. And of course, for these brands and manufacturers to sort of review themselves.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. The other thing that I think we had in place at corporate that was beneficial, that I could see being helpful in our industry, is a willingness to have the uncomfortable conversations. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that is what this is all about. So thank you for sharing your platform on this issue. We had diversity and inclusion action councils, and that was basically at the sector level about the business and the inequity that might be present, and the things that could be done to level the playing field. And I think we have to have that here, and it can't be just for the moment.
No, that's the thing. I mean, that is exactly my hope and my intention, is to look, thankfully, with brilliance like yours and our other guests, this podcast platform has grown tremendously. It is literally in the top 10% of all podcasts in all genres, in all of podcast library of 750,000 podcasts or more, according to its numbers for downloads. I mean, that's just a simple fact. Wow. I know, it's amazing, and I'm grateful, and it's really because of all of the smart people like yourself that have come on. We've built it together. I know that for a fact, and that is why I just said, can you really not be a part of this conversation? Can you not? Like, how can you be dedicated to an industry and helping the industry be better now that the blinders are off on this, for you, LuAnn, as an individual, on this huge gross inequity? Yep. And my answer was, I cannot. And I've shared on it before that it's going to take me a few months before I have confidence in these conversations, if ever. But I just thought, I can't wait until I'm confident, because that could be 2 months, 2 years from now. I don't know. Yep. And that's not helpful to wait. Yep. And I have the platform now. And so it's with great hopes for doing the right thing and being part of the right the right of supplying the right answers, just like I want you to find the right answers on all the other things, like you mentioned, marketing, finance, all of that stuff. It's like we need right answers for this
Absolutely.
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the other thing too is outreach to the community. Most of us are, giving back in some way. I think that's also an opportunity to think about diversity as it relates to your philanthropic efforts, internship opportunities. I mentioned that I went to a historically Black college. Many of them have interior design programs. I would venture to say a lot of those students probably do not have the same access to opportunities that folks at larger institutions that are more well known in the design industry do. So how, what can you do to help?
Right there. What you're saying is the analogy is going back to when your parents made a decision to send you to a school with more opportunity versus the schools that had less opportunity. So now as a young Black person, if you decide, yes, I'll take a 4-year break. Thank you very much. Like I feel the weight of that when you describe that. I really did. And also learn a skill and a trade and a craft that I'm passionate about. But that decision is also innately affording less opportunity at the end of those 4 years than if you went to FIT or something else that is just like more mainstream school.
Yes.
Yeah. But I have to say, I think if there's any period of your life to have that 4-year mental break, it's right there. Would you agree?
Well, and it really,
because you're forming so much of your like confidence and everything.
Totally.
There, right?
And it's so, for me, it provided a level of balance.
Yes.
You really get to the heart of who you are when you're able to take down the facade and be amongst people who are like-minded. It just, I wouldn't trade that experience for the world.
No.
It definitely shapes who you are.
And it's funny because, now I'm starting to think about different things, like when we have conversations on the show that are business related and a guest describes an experience or describes a tactic or something, I'm always in my brain searching for the way to rephrase it and restate it so it hits somebody else right between the eyes, right? So maybe if the guest is sharing a tactic that a 2 million plus firm is using, I will say, well, hey, if you're a baby designer, this is maybe how you would do it, right? That's my thing. It's at the back and forth, right? And so I'm starting to feel my feet on this now, because as you're describing this safetiness of this 4 years of being able to show up every day without the facade and without the mask. I want to say to my white friends, think about even if things like High Point, right? High Point can be challenging in that you're on all day and you're going from event to event to event and from meeting to meeting to meeting, and you come back at the end of the day and there's a level of exhaustion, and it's really, if you're a white, God, now I know what happens if you're a Black person, my goodness. But I mean, as I'm saying to my white friends, just think, like, all day you've had to be nice. You've had to be ready to go and ready to share and ready to, And there is this at the end of the day. It's like, okay,
it's exhausting.
I'm exhausted. Yes. And it's like, that's the analogy. Like, as white people, we don't have to do it just walking out our front door the way you do. But if you want to start to put yourself just the tiniest bit of having the tiniest empathy for what your friends are going through, and they're looking at you and saying, I'm tired and exhausted, just slice these tiny little things. We're like, oh my goodness, I had to be on all day. Like, with white people all day. It was exhausting. And I'm white. Right. This is it. I hear it, and I know that I'll never experience it to the way that you do, Cheryl, but I am starting to understand on the tiniest level and taking, it's like that. It's like just taking those tiny slices and going, oh, it's this times a million, this times a gabillion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
I don't know, how do we get around it though, Cheryl? How do we make it change?
I think we take personal ownership. A lot of people reached out. We talked about this off air during, in the wake of George Floyd's public murder, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, all of that happened at one time. That was a very emotional couple of weeks. On a bunch of different levels, seeing those things play out in the media, dealing with your own issues, things that you had buried and didn't know were buried that surfaced, having to show up and provide some level of leadership on social media to your audience, and then being tapped for opportunities or by people who wanted you to advise them on what they should do. It was really exhausting. Frankly, I've never been more emotionally exhausted in my entire life. But I do think that there are some things that people can do, particularly people, non-people of color. Number one, I think you got to use your voice. We all, no matter whether you are a solopreneur or whether you've got a big firm or you work in a magazine or a manufacturing company, we all have a platform that we can use to speak up. I can't tell you how many people reached out and said, I don't know what to say. Just say something. No one's judging. Well, they might be, but whatever. If they are, oh well. Just bless their heart. You have to speak up against injustice. You've got a platform, and whether you've got 1,000 followers or 100,000 followers, I still feel like you have a responsibility to say something. So number one, I'd say use your voice, and we cannot mistake visibility for change. That's right. Something that concerns me, that this issue is getting more visibility than it ever has that I could remember. That's great. That's necessary, but visibility doesn't necessarily equal change.
Right. We have to actually do it's like what I say every show, decide to be excellent. Yeah. Okay, we gave you this information, but unless you do something with it, absolutely. If it sits in your notebook, I'm sorry, you're not going to be a better business person. Yeah. So just being part of this and talking about it, if you don't take your personal action within yourself and start that chain reaction, then this is just talk and not action.
Yep. Yes, I think you also have to speak up, and you have to say something. You see something, say something. And you're at tables that I'm not going to be at. Even sometimes I'm one of few, sometimes I'm not there. And so if there's an opportunity to speak up in an environment that is maybe homogenous, where there is no voice, there is no person of color, take on that responsibility to be the person that's like, hey, no, we're not going to joke like that here, or right, you're wrong, and here's why. It takes that, I feel like, to disrupt the stuff that's been happening for centuries, and it really does start at home. And then I am a firm believer in letting my ballot do my talking.
Yes.
I do not miss an election. Part of that is how I grew up. I remember my parents telling us a story about the first time they voted together as a married couple. They were married in 1968, and they went to the poll, and there was a white guy with a shotgun in his lap at the door. Just posted up as an intimidation tactic. And that just stuck in my head. And so every time the precinct opens, I don't care whether we're voting to put a dotted line down my street or we're voting on a president. I am there. And I research. I literally go in with a printout, a sample ballot. You can get that. I Google these people. I do my research because to me, that's my opportunity to make a difference. At the local level, at the state level, at the national level, I don't miss the opportunity. So I'm hoping that this visibility will turn into action, and part of that action and our responsibility to act happens at the poll.
So I have to say that part in there really speaks to me, because a month ago I would have said white privilege. I don't know what that is. Now I know exactly. I shouldn't say everything what it is, but I know very clearly some of the parts of white privilege that I am part of and I experience. And when you describe how you took it so seriously, all the way to like voting for the lines in the street. I know it's a joke, but it's not a joke. And that's the point. And the researching. And when I hear that now, my brain is going, oh, there's your white privilege, because of course I've always voted in the big elections and stuff, but I'm just like, I don't need to vote in those because why? And now what I'm hearing is the end of the sentence. The end of the sentence is my life is good. I'm fine. What do I care what they do here and there? And that end of the sentence, I didn't have a month ago. I would have just said, well, I don't know. What do I care? But now I know why I was privileged to not care. And so it's a big thing. And I am now reading the paper every day on not passing the articles that I would have normally passed on that are about our local school board and our local elections and stuff. And it is, it is for me what I said. It's the peeling back the layers of understanding. And I'm saying this to you if you're white and you have been thinking, hey, but I'm good. It's these are the ways that we had no blasted idea. If you and if you have been enlightened, all the more power to you. But for those of you that maybe are like me, it's this thing. And that's why I really am hoping that it's different, Cheryl, because I do think, at least in my world, I am aware of a lot more conversation happening among white people that is of a deeper level of trying to grasp the understanding of exactly what your experience is and exactly our obliviousness. Yeah, there's work to be done.
There is work to be done.
And maybe that's what it is. It's like you said, you've just got to be willing to show up and talk. And whether that's in your own business with your own employees, or that's here, you sharing your time with us, or, I don't know, at the grocery store, right? It's like you got to show up. Yeah. Well, you know what? You always show up, lady. You show up and you teach us business. You're teaching us, you bringing your diversity training back and teaching us here. Oh my goodness. Well, Cheryl, I love you. I adore you. I admire you in every way, as a human person, as an interior designer, as a Black lady, as a Black designer, every which way. You always, just show up in a way that there's no question it's to be admired and to be emulated, and to really strive to bring the level of just thoughtfulness and determination and just willingness to do the work, like you say. So everything you do, I've noticed it from the very first time I talked with you. And so thank you for showing up.
Thank you, LuAnn. I appreciate it. Love you too. And I appreciate the work that you're doing to elevate this conversation. It is necessary, and it is most appreciated.
Think about that very simple act of sourcing art for your clients. For white designers, sourcing for white clients, you can't even fathom needing to hunt and hunt for appropriate art. Yes, you may go down rabbit holes looking for something specific, but you never need to look for something that's appropriate. This exercise confronts Cheryl and our Black design colleagues every day. It's another layer of racism and how it must wear on your mind and your heart to experience this. Cheryl's experience as a diversity leader and trainer in her previous position got me to thinking about how challenging that must be as well. The hurdles, the obstacles, the deaf ears, and also the well-meaning people who get it wrong, who are oblivious. It's just a hard job. And it got me to doing what I do, thinking and researching. I came across an article by Dana Brownlee, who is a contributor to Forbes. In an article she titled, "Dear White People, here are 10 actions you can take to promote racial justice in the workplace." And in this article, Dana writes, "Let me be clear for anyone who wants to pat themselves on the back for forwarding a racially conscious social media meme in recent days. It's not a profile encouraged to comment on a horrific video, then just continue on with business as usual. In this moment, we all have some level of responsibility. As Martin Luther King famously said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." So I'm asking, are you still engaged or have you gone silent? Are you still doing? Cheryl showed up to have this conversation, to teach us, to bear her experiences for our benefit. Please don't let it be in vain. And to my white friends, can you imagine waiting until you are in college to feel free to be you in all the ways that you are you? Good, bad, happy, sad, truly you? Don't say yes. Don't knee-jerk yes. Walking into an interview, nervous, going to meet a new group of people is not the same. Go have a one-on-one conversation with a Black friend. Allow them to share the real deal, what their life is really like, not what you think it's like. Look into their eyes, see the truth, feel the truth. I promise you it's different. The world is different for our Black friends. Why? Because of the color of their skin. What if your life was completely dictated by the color of your eyes? I mean, do you get this? Do you get the absurdity of this horrible injustice? All right, I hope you do. That's what this whole thing is about, is to keep putting it in front of us, to keep making us think, to keep making us engage, okay? My great thanks to My Doma Studio for sponsoring the show. My Doma Studio is committed to helping you run a more efficient design project, and to that end, a more efficient design firm. With QuickBooks integration, time tracking, outstanding responsive customer support, and a dedication to your profitability, My Doma Studio is the #1 platform to manage your business. Go to mydomastudio.com/a well-designed business to get your free trial started today. That's mydomastudio.com/a well-designed business. I also want to encourage you to take Cheryl's call to action seriously. Look around for brands like Sylvester Alexander to support. While you're at it, take a moment today to visit sylvesteralexander.com. You'll see the beautiful line of furniture designed by Cheryl called Belle, and you can read about Mitchell Parson, the owner of Sylvester Alexander. These are ways you can do your part in creating inclusion and progress in our industry. Every action by each one of us matters. All right? Now, before I leave you today, I want to encourage you to be on my email list, because during the last 2 quarters of 2020, I have a few things coming out, all right? First of all, the 3rd book is coming out in November, and we are planning an all-day virtual event with sessions by each of my co-authors, okay? LuAnn Live will be held virtually in the first quarter of 2021, but of course the registration will happen later in 2020. All right. And my course roster is expanding. If you were at LuAnn Live last year, do you remember the shout out to me while I was standing on stage to create LuAnn University? Judith, thank you. If you do, you saw my knowing sigh, the sigh of yes, I want to, but the sigh of give me a minute. Well, it's been a minute. Soon we will have choices for you in all aspects of the running the business side of your firm. LuAnn University is going to be the business education that your design school could not provide you. Coming this fall, we are setting the foundation for LuAnn U by opening various departments. Profit is in the numbers, okay? This is one department. And this fall, under this department, we have 2 courses, all right? First, Kat Anderson is going to teach Introduction to Cloud-Based Accounting, aka QuickBooks for Designers, but we can't say that, okay? So it's like Introduction to Cloud-Based Accounting 101, all right? This is for you if you know you should know how to record, track, and understand your money, your invoices, your chart of accounts, but you keep putting it off. Okay. Now, that's every one of us if you haven't done it yet. This is a non-negotiable. You must know how to manage your money, okay? You must know your numbers once and for all. And when you do this, with Kat teaching you exactly the details on this, I promise you, you will sleep well knowing you have it locked down. Then in the same department, we have Peter Lang, the designer CPA, who is going to take it to the next level. This is the 201 course, and there are specific requisites to being in this course, which will be outlined on the landing page, okay? The focus of this course is once you have the process of your numbers locked down and you understand how to move in and out of your cloud-based accounting software, AKA, all right, Peter is going to teach you how to use this information to strategize for growth, for profit, and for your year-end closeout, okay? This is very, very important, especially at the time of year-end, and Peter will be addressing a lot of these issues, okay? This course is for you if you are making money, okay? You know how to run your cloud-based accounting software, and you need to know now how to use the information in these reports to make sound financial decisions. It's that next level up, okay? I have 3 other courses launching in addition to these. So like I said, get on my email list so you get all the information about all the courses, the information about the pricing, about the early bird deadlines, the start dates, everything, okay? And as with everything I do, these are taught live because for me, it's always about the conversation. So to get on my email list, go to LuAnnNiagara.com/goodies, okay? Best way to get on my email list, because when you do that, you also get access to some free resources from previous episodes that might help you today in your business, okay? So thank you for sharing your time with me today, and thank you again to Cheryl Luckett for sharing her time with all of us, okay? I'd love it if you would share your aha moments with me in either the Instagram or the Facebook post for this episode. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's be the ones to change the world. Decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNiagara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.